My name is Maris Hale, and the last time my brother put his hands on me, the sky over Charleston smelled like charcoal and someone else's bragging rights. It was one of those humid Sundays that stuck to your skin and your memory. Caleb's backyard pulsed with noise. Cousins replaying the same stories for people who pretended to hear them. Uncles baptized in light beer. A neighbor at the grill turning ribs into excuses. I stood near the azaleas with a plastic cup sweating in my fist, nodding, smiling, performing a version of myself that never fooled anybody. I kept telling myself I was there because families bend, they don't break. I kept telling myself that if I kept showing up, they'd stop treating me like a leftover someone shoved into the back of the fridge and forgot. Venus saw me before I saw her. She always did. She floated between clusters of conversation like a pageant queen who had traded her sash for a subtler crown. Her smile had measurement to it, precise, deliberate, the exact degree of warmth required to scald. "Maris, sweet girl," she said, too loud, smoothing her hand over my shoulder like it was charity work. "Still between jobs? Must be nice. All that free time." Laughter cracked around us, small, fragile pieces of it that people could pretend weren't theirs. I swallowed. "I'm freelancing," I said, steady. "Flexible. It pays." Venus tilted her head like I was a dog who'd learned a party trick. "Flexible is such a kind word for living off other people's structure, don't you think?" Caleb stood beside the cooler, pretending to be fascinated by ice. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. I felt the crack before I heard it. Not rage, something thinner. A hairline split that lets in air you never wanted to breathe. "I never asked for anything," I said. Too soft to be a defense, too true to be a lie. "Oh, come on," Venus chimed, eyes bright, teeth brighter. "That's such a martyr line. Just own it, honey. You drift. You show up empty-handed. You're 37 and still deciding." She said the family was tired. She said it like I wasn't part of it. I looked around the yard, the human version of a polite shrug. Aunt May didn't speak up. Uncle Brent stared into his plastic cup like it had answers at the bottom. I followed the tilt of the porch steps to where Mom sat, small and straight, holding something I couldn't place. She saw me seeing her. She looked away. "Say something," I told myself. "Anything." But by the time the words lined up, Caleb stepped into the space between me and whatever I might have said. His eyes were glassy. His voice reached for volume and found imitation. "You think you're better than us, little sis?" he said, spit sharp on the S. "Walking around like some sad poet. You're nothing, Maris. Trash like you doesn't belong in my life." The world tightened. The cicadas got louder and farther away at the same time. "Is that what you think of me?" I asked, and I hate that my voice wobbled, like a bridge invited to collapse. He stepped closer, the way people on TV do when they want you to feel trapped, and then he swung. The fist wasn't a surprise, it was an answer. It found my jaw clean, hot, bright. My cup arced, my knees went out, and the lawn came up quick. For one long second, all I could hear was the electric buzz of summer and the drum in my chest trying to break out. No one moved. Of course they didn't. I sat up slow. The taste of pennies slicked my tongue. Somewhere behind the porch screen, a dog barked once and then thought better of it. Mom rose without hurry, every motion a decision she could live with. Up close I saw what she held. Dad's pocket watch, the face cracked diagonally, the minute hand trapped between two numbers, like it had tried to run and got pinned. She came to me. She didn't touch my cheek. She didn't say my name. She placed the watch in my palm and closed my fingers over it with a pressure that said, "There, that's that." Then she turned her back and walked away. It didn't feel like love. It felt like paperwork, final, notarized. The cut on my lip wasn't deep. The cut beneath it was. I stood, wobbly, sure, and didn't look at anyone except the gate. No dramatic speeches, no promises, no revenge. I walked out of the yard, down the side of the house where the hose leaked into hard earth, past the sagging fence whose nail had always needed fixing. I kept walking until the laughter thinned and the smell of burned sugar turned back into air. I didn't say goodbye. No one ran after me. That night, I parked my car beneath the sick neon of a 24-hour pharmacy and let the light buzz me into the next version of myself. I pressed a napkin to my mouth and stared at the pocket watch in my lap. The second hand still worked, twitching forward like a nervous habit. The minute hand didn't move at all. I promised myself I wouldn't either, not back. 3 weeks later, I packed 2 duffels and left Charleston without a clap of thunder to dignify it. Houston wasn't a dream. It was a Craigslist ad for a warehouse job with a supervisor who didn't ask questions and a studio apartment so small you had to sweet-talk the trash can to open the fridge. I liked how anonymous it felt to be tired in a place where no one remembered your birthday. For the first 2 years, I didn't say the word family out loud. I moved pallets until my hands stopped being hands and started being tools with skin. I learned which vending machine didn't eat quarters and which foreman would trade an extra shift for silence. I told the nurse at the ER that someone was coming to get me on my 34th birthday, and then walked myself home with a prescription in my pocket that I folded until it looked like trash and put in the bin. I wasn't angry. Not then. I was empty like a room after the movers leave and your footsteps sound like strangers. The pocket watch sat in the top drawer of a particle board dresser, unwound, face up, a little moon that had fallen and decided to stay broken. Year 5, the emptiness learned my name and started to sound like a dare. I wrote Caleb a letter with no return address and all the softness I had left, the kind you save for sacred things and last chances. Venus answered, typed, clinical, cold. She said I wasn't cut off. I was consequence avoidant. She said I drained people. She signed his life for him. I stood on a 5th-floor balcony above a grocery store parking lot and tore that letter into weather. The paper spun in the updraft like it wanted to stay a while and watch me make choices. I went inside, opened a $20 laptop that wheezed louder than the AC, and typed hello into a language that didn't care who I used to be. The screen blinked, stubborn, then finally answered back. That was the first night I felt something that wasn't loss. But if you want to understand why I didn't crawl back when the silence finally broke years later, if you want to know why I opened my front door in San Diego and refused to hug my brother. Hello, you have to stand in this yard with me for a moment longer. You have to feel the way a room of blood relatives can make themselves into furniture. You have to hold a broken watch and realize that time, like love, can be handed to you not as a gift, but as an exit. On the porch, a moth found the screen and battered itself against a square of light that wasn't a door. I could have told it. I could have said, that isn't how you get inside. But I didn't know then how to tell myself that either. So I walked, and I kept walking. And I learned how to build a life that didn't require permission to exist. The next time I saw Caleb and Venus, years later, they were on my doorstep with suitcases and smiles. But that's another part. For now, remember the moment that set the rest in motion. The fist, the watch, the silence that got louder the farther I went. Remember that every boundary I draw later started here, with my mouth bleeding and my mother handing me a stopped minute like a benediction. Remember that the watch never ticked for me again. Houston was never a plan. It was a landing pad that didn't ask questions. A Craigslist ad for warehouse work and a shoebox apartment with one window facing an alley. The rent was cheap because the floor tilted and the plumbing sang at night. I told myself it was fine. Nobody knew me here. Nobody had expectations. That anonymity was its own kind of mercy. For the first 2 years, I didn't use the word family in conversation. Not once. I loaded pallets until my palms hardened like bark. I swept aisles long after my shift ended, just to keep moving. I learned the sound of silence so well it started to feel like furniture. Birthdays went unmarked. Holidays blurred into double shifts. When coworkers asked if I had plans, I'd shrug. When the neighbor across the hall offered leftovers, I claimed allergies. It was easier to starve a little than let anyone close enough to remember me. On my 34th birthday, Houston air sat heavy, more heat than oxygen. I collapsed at the loading dock before I even knew I was dizzy. Woke up in a hospital bed, IV dripping like an hourglass. A nurse with kind eyes asked, "Is someone coming for you?" I lied. I said yes. Then I walked home alone, prescription bottle in my pocket like a souvenir of a party I hadn't wanted. That was the first night I realized hollowness could weigh more than grief. The cracked pocket watch stayed in my dresser drawer, unwound, face up. I would look at it sometimes, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop. A reminder, time had been given to me as punishment, not gift. By year 5, emptiness had teeth. I started asking questions in the quiet. Why Caleb hadn't written, why Mom hadn't called. I hated that I still wanted answers. That hunger curdled into something else, resolve. So I wrote him, a letter with no return address. I said I missed him. I said I wanted us to try, even if it was small. I sent it to his house in Charleston. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, an envelope came back. Not in his handwriting. It was Venus's. Typed. Cold. Sterile. She said I drained people. Said I wallowed in victimhood. She wrote, "You weren't cut off. You just couldn't handle the consequences of your own selfishness." No signature from him, just hers. I read it once. Twice. Then again until the words blurred into shapes I couldn't separate. My chest ached like I'd swallowed gravel. I stepped out onto the 5th-floor balcony, Charleston memories hammering behind my eyes. Below, a grocery store parking lot buzzed with sodium lights. I tore the letter into strips and let the wind scatter it, like maybe the night air could rewrite it into something less cruel. I walked back inside, opened the wheezing laptop I'd bought for $20 at a pawn shop, and stared at the blank screen. I typed "Hello World." Nothing worked. The cursor blinked like a taunt. So I tried again, and again. Loops I didn't understand, buttons that refused to work, error messages that stung harder than insults. But every failure felt cleaner than silence. Every wrong answer meant I was still trying. Warehouse shifts bled into midnight tutorials. I would get home at 3 a.m., muscles shaking, eyes burning, and still sit down to code. Not because I was building something yet, but because Venus's words haunted me. You'll never build anything on your own. That voice became my metronome. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard her. Every time my body begged for rest, I pictured Caleb standing by the cooler, letting her cut me to pieces. And then one night, months later, the line finally worked. Just a flicker of code, a tiny program that blinked the words "Hello World" onto my battered screen. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I whispered it out loud, voice cracked and thin. Take that, Venus. It was the first small rebellion. The first proof I could make something without their permission. What I didn't know then was that the code would change my entire life. That one broken watch in a drawer and one cheap laptop on a desk would collide into something bigger than either of them could have imagined. And by the time my name ended up in boardrooms and on podcasts, Caleb and Venus would come crawling back, suitcases in hand, pretending the punch never landed, pretending the silence never existed. But that's later. For now, it's enough to say the hollow years didn't destroy me. They tempered me. And the fire was only just beginning. The first real step forward didn't come wrapped in a ribbon. It came in the form of a simple inventory app I built out of boredom and stubbornness. I designed it for the warehouse where I hauled boxes, a tool to schedule runs and track pallets more cleanly. Nothing special. Just a patch over the holes I saw every day. When I showed it to my boss, I half expected him to laugh. Instead, he blinked, scratched his beard, and said, "Wait, you did this yourself?" That word "yourself" lodged in my chest like something sacred. A week later, his brother-in-law passed the app to a small logistics firm in town. They asked me to come in. I walked into their office in a thrift store blazer, sweat running down my back. The man interviewing me looked like he hadn't slept in days. He scrolled through my demo, silent. Then he said, "You're raw, but you're real. We can work with that." For the first time in years, I felt valuable. Not tolerated, not pitied, valuable. They hired me. Junior position, entry-level pay. But to me, it was oxygen. I quit the warehouse, bought a real desk, and paid off my last payday loan. I even allowed myself to breathe without checking the air first. But success doesn't fill holes. It just reshapes them. The following spring, they sent me to a tech conference in Austin. I nearly didn't go. My only clean blouse still had a stain near the collar, but my manager insisted. "Exposure," she said. "Shake hands. Eat the free food." The conference felt like another planet. Polished booths, lanyards like badges of honor, young CEOs tossing out business cards like they were worth gold. I kept my head down until someone called my name. Maris. I turned. It was Dante Marshall, a kid I'd known in high school, the one who used to borrow my notes in computer lab. He looked sharper now. Money in his shoes, ambition in his smile. "Dante," I said, stunned. We grabbed coffee. He told me he'd gone into venture capital, started companies, failed, built again. Then he leaned across the table, eyes catching mine. "We're working on something, early stage, AI logistics. I've got a team of pedigreed people with degrees coming out their ears, but you've lived through things algorithms don't understand. That matters. You think differently." His words cracked something open. For the first time, my scars weren't baggage. They were currency. I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat in the hotel, staring at my laptop, thinking about the punch, the letter, the silence. I thought about the pocket watch in my drawer, frozen in time, and I realized maybe I could unstick myself even if the watch never ticked again. So I joined Dante's team. 2 years later, I wasn't hauling boxes anymore. I was in boardrooms, demoing products, hearing investors use words like scalable and innovative with my name attached. And then came the podcast. It was supposed to be light, a breezy conversation about how a former warehouse girl coded her way into an AI startup. But halfway through, the host asked, "Do you ever wish your family had been more involved in your rise?" The question was simple. The answer lodged in my throat. I could have smiled it off, but instead the truth slipped out. "Sometimes," I said, "family isn't who raised you, it's who respected you." Silence on the recording. Then she moved on. But the internet didn't. The clip went viral overnight, shared on Reels, stitched on TikTok, turned into mugs and t-shirts. Respect is thicker than blood. My name, Maris Hale, printed on merch I'd never ordered. Suddenly, people wanted to hear me speak, wanted to see the girl who'd walked away from Charleston with nothing and built something out of silence. I lived in a high-rise overlooking the San Diego coast. Marble counters, glass walls, a view of the ocean that caught fire at sunset. And yet most nights, I still ate eggs standing at the stove. Money hadn't changed me. Silence had. Then one Tuesday night, while reviewing product updates, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line. "Your brother's not doing so well lately." No greeting, no name, just that. I checked the area code. Out of state, but clipped and cold, like someone who wanted to care without admitting it. I knew who it was. Mom. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. 9 years without a word. Not a call, not a card. And now this. Was Caleb sick, broke, or had my name trending online finally reminded them I existed? I set the phone down, stepped onto the balcony, and let the wind slap my face. Below me, the city sparkled with strangers' laughter. I told myself not to care, told myself I was finished. But deep down, I hated that a small part of me still wanted them to be proud. That was the most dangerous part of all, because when silence finally breaks, it doesn't whisper. It echoes. 3 days after that message, I got my answer. A knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My building had a front desk, a keypad, layers of privacy money bought me. Whoever stood outside had help getting up here. I opened the door, and there they were, Caleb and Venus, standing side by side like a glossy magazine cover gone stale. Suitcases in hand, smiles rehearsed. "Little sis," Caleb said, arms wide as if the last 9 years hadn't existed. "Gonna leave us hanging?" Venus stepped forward, her lipstick the same shade I remembered from Charleston, her tone syrupy. "Maris, wow. This place is stunning. You've really made something of yourself." I didn't move, didn't step aside. Let the silence between us stretch sharp as barbed wire. They waited for an invitation in. I didn't give one. But Caleb had never cared much for permission. He strolled past me like the apartment was his. Venus followed, heels clicking against my tile. I shut the door slower than I should have, the lock echoing too loud in my ears. Caleb's eyes roamed everywhere. The windows, the furniture, the art I barely noticed anymore. "This view," he muttered. "Who would have thought?" I stayed by the counter, arms crossed. "What are you doing here?" Venus spoke first, as always. "We were in the area. Figured it was time. It's been far too long." "Has it?" I asked. Caleb chuckled like it was all a joke. "Come on, sis. Family's family." That almost made me laugh. Almost. He collapsed onto my couch like it belonged to him, like he hadn't once watched me bleed on the lawn and walked away. Pressure coiled in my chest. Not rage yet, just something heavy, a reminder that their silence had never been peace. Venus perched on the armrest, graceful, calculating. "Things have been a little tight lately," she said. "Nothing dramatic. You know how the economy is." I didn't respond, just watched her lips curve into a smile that never touched her eyes. "So," she continued, "we thought since you've got all this space more than one person needs, we could crash here, just for a few weeks. Nothing permanent, a soft place to land." She paused, waiting for the word that had always worked on me before. Family. I stared at them, at Caleb, leaning forward, elbows on knees, trying to sell sincerity. At Venus, tilting her head just so, as though her presence was a gift. And just like that, I saw it. The truth I'd been too stubborn to admit years ago. They hadn't come to apologize. They hadn't come to reconnect. They'd come because they needed something. That was all I'd ever been to them. A spare tire, a backup plan. Behind them, on a shelf in the hallway, sat the cracked photo I'd never thrown away. The one from the family barbecue. Me, Caleb, and Dad before the stroke. Caleb had called it garbage once, tossed it out. I'd fished it from a box, frame cracked, glass splintered across my face. I kept it anyway. Now, with them standing in my living room, I understood why. It was never about nostalgia. It was proof. Proof of what had broken and what hadn't been fixed. I picked it up, held it in my hands. "You remember this?" I asked. Caleb smiled, soft, casual. "Yeah, good times." "You threw it out," I said. "Called it trash." His face flickered, then smoothed. "Did I? Don't remember." Of course he didn't. Venus leaned forward. "We're not here to stir anything up, Maris. We just want to move forward, together." I set the photo back down, face down this time. "I need time to think," I said. Venus nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Of course. Totally understand. Just a few weeks, Maris. No pressure." Caleb patted my shoulder on his way to the door. "It's good to see you." I didn't flinch, didn't nod, didn't say goodbye. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, the quiet pressing harder than their presence ever could. They had come all this way to pretend the past hadn't happened, to erase blood and silence with a smile. But I wasn't that woman on the lawn anymore, and they weren't family. Not anymore. That night, I sat on the balcony with the waves crashing below, the pocket watch heavy in my palm. For years, I'd told myself the minute hand stuck between numbers was a curse. But maybe it wasn't stuck. Maybe it was pointing, warning me that time given to people who don't value it is time wasted. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, I opened my door to a wall of boxes, and behind it, Caleb and Venus, grinning like they were early to a party I had never invited them to. "Hope it's okay," Caleb said, dragging a bag inside. "We figured it'd be easier to just get settled." Venus followed with a wrapped appliance. "Where do you want the air fryer?" I didn't answer, because the silence in me was the only thing holding back the storm I felt rising. And once again, they mistook my silence for permission. By day 3, it wasn't my home anymore. Her makeup bottles were scattered across the sink. His socks appeared in the laundry basket I never invited him to use. The thermostat clicked 2 degrees higher than I'd left it. My fridge held one of my meal prep containers, half-eaten, no note. They spread through my house like fog. Slow, invasive, impossible to push back once it settled. Venus had the nerve to wear one of my hoodies in the kitchen, stirring coffee like she'd bought the pot herself. "Good morning," she chirped, too bright. Caleb wandered in shirtless, scratching his stomach. "Man, that bed's firm but good. I could sleep for days." I muttered, "I'd rather you didn't." He didn't hear me, or pretended not to. By dinner, the silence between us had hardened into concrete. I ordered Thai for 3, not sure why I bothered. Venus pushed tofu across her plate, sighing. "Some people forget who helped raise them," she murmured, eyes low, voice sharp enough to cut. "Forget who kept the lights on when they were too busy dreaming." I set my fork down, and some people confuse silence with consent. Her smile twitched. Caleb chewed slower, pretending not to notice the tension thickening like cement around us. That night I walked the hallway, stopped outside their room. The door cracked open, light spilling out. I heard Venus laughing softly, Caleb answering. They sounded like vacationers, not squatters. I looked at the cracked photo frame on the shelf again. That broken line across my younger self's face. Proof of what I already knew. They weren't family. They were intruders. If they wouldn't leave on their own, I'd show them out. On my terms. The next morning I checked the deed, just to remind myself. My name. Every inch mine. Then I printed 2 copies of a guest agreement. Boundaries, spelled out in ink. I set them on the counter and waited. Around noon, they strolled in, casual as clouds. Caleb picked up 1 copy, raised an eyebrow. "What's this? Legal paperwork?" I kept my voice flat. "Your guests. That's what this outlines." Venus picked up the other, eyes flicking across the clauses. No alterations to property. No guests without permission. Shared spaces remain under homeowner discretion. Maximum stay, 30 days. Her lips curled like she was tasting something sour. "Wow. You really think this makes you better than us?" No, I said. It makes me clear. Caleb scoffed. Cold, Maris. This is cold. I met his eyes. It's not about cold, it's about respect. Venus leaned forward, arms crossed, voice sharp now. You walk around here like some self-made queen. You don't even remember who fed you when you were 15. Who paid your bus fare when you couldn't? I remember everything, I said. That's why this isn't a favor, it's a line. Caleb tried to diffuse, voice softer. We're family. Families don't do this. Families don't move into your house without asking, I said. His silence told me he had no comeback. But Venus, she cracked. You think you're above us now? Her voice cut, eyes flashing. You don't even know what he's done for this family. Caleb snapped his head toward her. Venus, don't. But she was already gone. He lost our house, she spat. All of it. Blackjack, sports bets, loans. I begged him to stop. He didn't. And now we're here. Not because we missed you, because we had nowhere else to go. The words hit like blunt force, but not where she intended. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel rage. I felt control. For the first time in years, I wasn't the little sister cleaning up someone else's mess. I was the homeowner. Venus's eyes shone, not with tears, but with cornered defiance. You want us to sign your little paper? Fine. She scrawled her name across the bottom, shoved the pen at Caleb. He hesitated, jaw tight, then signed too, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. They left the kitchen in silence, documents left behind like discarded weapons. I carried one copy to the bookshelf, moved the magazines aside, laid the signed paper next to the cracked photo frame. A broken past, a boundary drawn, both permanent now. But when I looked into their eyes as they signed, I saw something I couldn't shake. This wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And I knew, this wasn't over. 3 nights later, the storm broke. Not outside, though thunder rolled off the Pacific like war drums, but inside my phone at 2:40 a.m. Dozens of notifications, missed calls, texts from numbers I hadn't seen in years. What's going on, Maris? Is this real? That video of you yelling at a woman? It's everywhere. At first I thought it was spam or some troll pulling a stunt. Then I saw the link. It was grainy, bad lighting, a kitchen angle I recognized instantly because it was my kitchen. Footage from my own security cameras. In the video, I was standing at the island, arms raised, mid-explanation. Firm, yes. Frustrated, maybe. But not screaming, not threatening. The clip had been doctored. My voice distorted, raised into something ugly. Over it, they layered the sound of a woman crying. Thin, hollow, looped. A voice that sounded like Venus. The caption? Billionaire tech founder caught in domestic dispute. By 3:15, the video had over 2 million views. My body went cold. Not rage, not panic. Just the slow realization that this was the play. They couldn't get in through the front door, so they decided to burn the whole house down. But what they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that I'd learned how to protect myself. After a break-in at my office last year, paranoia had become habit. Every camera fed to an offline hard drive, locked in my desk. Every angle recorded clean, uncut. I crossed the house in the dark, the storm outside covering my steps, plugged the drive into my desktop, watched the raw footage spool to life. There I was in the kitchen that night, arms raised, yes, but my voice calm. No screaming, no crying. Just a tired woman setting boundaries in her own home. And then, in another file, one I hadn't noticed until now, Venus pacing the guest room a week earlier. Caleb slouched in the corner, silent. Her voice, sharp, deliberate. If we cut it right, no one will care it's fake. We just need her to look angry, that's all. Caleb mumbled something back. She'll sue us. Venus, she's too soft. She won't hit back. I sat there, staring at the screen, my jaw tight. They hadn't just wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to destroy me. So I did what they never expected. I hit back. By dawn, my attorney had the originals. By 6, the files were in the hands of media contacts. By 7, my publicist blasted out the truth. By 9, the headlines had flipped. False abuse claim backfires. Extortion attempt caught on tape. The comments poured in. Always document. Always protect yourself. Respect to the quiet ones who don't flinch. I sat on the couch with my coffee, rain streaking the windows, and waited. Behind their door, Caleb and Venus stayed silent. No laughter, no footsteps. Just a hush that stretched too long. My phone buzzed again, a new number, one line. We didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at it, my thumb hovered. Then I set the phone face down. Because there's a difference between making a mistake and drawing blood on purpose. And once someone tries to take your name, your work, your dignity, there's no crawling back to breakfast table apologies. No matter how many times they call you family. When I woke the next morning, their room was empty. No note, no goodbye, just gone. The bed stripped halfway, drawers left open like they'd fled in the middle of packing. They took almost everything, except for a half-used bottle of Venus's perfume abandoned on the counter. Sweet, artificial, the kind of scent that lingers too long, even after the person leaves. By noon, gossip blogs had already pivoted. Their names trailed in headlines like smoke, but the fire had moved on. Caleb's profile disappeared from social media completely. Venus posted something 2 days later, a dramatic photo of storm clouds with a caption about family being messy, but love remaining. I didn't react, didn't repost, didn't text, because love hadn't remained, only wreckage had. The apartment felt hollow for a few days, their absence echoing in the walls. But slowly, that quiet reshaped itself. It didn't ache anymore, it steadied. That week, I opened an envelope I'd been avoiding. A grant confirmation letter. $100,000 approved for a local literacy program dedicated to single mothers finishing their GEDs. I'd submitted it in Mom's name, quietly, months before. She always used to say, "Don't just grow money. Grow something that grows people." I sat with that line for a long time, reading and rereading the letter. My eyes drifted toward the shelf, where the cracked photo still sat. Glass split diagonally across my younger face. I hadn't fixed it. I never would. Some scars weren't meant to be erased. They were meant to remind. A few days later, I hosted dinner. Nothing fancy. Just roasted vegetables, wine, laughter that was too loud for my quiet apartment. 6 people around my table, coworkers, mentees, friends, people who showed up, not because they wanted something, but because they belonged. Mid-meal, Mark, the intern I once mentored, now running his own nonprofit, set down his fork. "You remember when I was going to quit, right after my dad passed? I walked into your office ready to hand in my badge. Instead, you gave me 2 weeks' pay and told me to go get right with myself. That saved me, Maris. Really did." The table went quiet, everyone's eyes on me. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being someone's anchor, but the weight of it settled in, warm. Because that was the moment it clicked. This was my family, not tied by blood, but by loyalty, not by expectation, but by choice. Later, after everyone left, I walked the hall slowly, fingertips brushing the wall. The house felt different. Not fortress-like, not empty, just earned. I stopped at the cracked photo, glass still jagged. In it, my younger self smiled, unaware of what was coming. The crack caught the lamplight, shining like a scar that had decided to glitter instead of hide. And for the first time in years, I let myself smile back. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Weeks later, another envelope arrived. Not sleek, not official, plain, worn, its edges softened by too many hands. It came from a pro bono clinic in Charleston, the same place that had handled Caleb's bankruptcy filings. Inside was paperwork I hadn't expected, proof that Mom had co-signed his second mortgage. She'd known about the spiral all along, known and stayed silent, known and still handed me that cracked pocket watch instead of a defense. Tucked between the forms was something stranger, a folded note, her handwriting unmistakable. "Maris, I didn't know how to reach you. I thought if I said less, the storm would pass. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe silence doesn't heal. It just hides. I'm proud of you, even if I never said it out loud." The words blurred, not because I believed them, but because part of me had waited my whole life to hear them, even scratched out on paper she'd never mailed. I booked a flight. Quiet, no announcement. Charleston hadn't seen me in nearly a decade, but I needed to walk its streets one last time. I stood outside the library where the literacy program was setting up, the grant already stamped with my mother's name. The air smelled like pine mulch and salt, just like the backyard that night. I pulled the pocket watch from my bag. Heavy, cracked, stopped. I ran my thumb across the frozen minute hand and realized I didn't need to carry its weight anymore. Inside, the library's shelves stood half empty, waiting to be filled. I left the watch in a display case by the entrance with a small plaque, in memory of time lost and time reclaimed. Walking out, the Atlantic wind hit my face, strong, unflinching. For the first time, I let it carry the past with it. Back home, the apartment greeted me like a place that finally fit. I hosted dinner again. Same table, same laughter, different ease, no ghosts in the hall, no perfume clinging to the air, just people passing bread and stories, a family bound not by obligation, but by choice. Later that night, alone with a glass of wine, I paused in front of the cracked photo. Still broken, still crooked, still mine. I didn't fix it. I didn't need to. Because some scars aren't shame, they're proof. I whispered to the quiet around me, not to anyone, not even to myself. They thought they could break me, but all they did was teach me how to build walls they'll never climb. Then I turned away, let the ocean crash outside my window, steady as breath. Not angry, not hollow, just finished. Some endings don't need noise. Just the sound of a door closing and staying closed.